Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for Flourish Focus. This is a series where we feature one-on-one exchanges with entrepreneurs around the world. My name is Emmalyn Shaw. I'm one of the managing partners of Flourish Ventures. We back disruptive fintech technologies that really drive economic resilience and financial health for consumers and businesses alike. Today, I am beyond thrilled and so excited to have with me the CEO and co-founder, Guy Assad from Clerkie. Guy, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, good to see you, and thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Look, let's just keep it easy. Let's just start with, give us a snapshot. What is Clerkie?
Yeah, I guess the simplest way that I would define what Clerkie is we build financial plumbing that automates and streamlines the repayment of debt. So you can imagine, like, any particular borrower like yourself or myself may have a debt with, like, any particular bank. And what we want to do is, take the complexity out of, like, the debt ecosystem altogether and basically help them make sense of the numbers and help them automate the payment back to their creditor. And one of the things that we do that's very unique is, oftentimes people may be faced with, like, some form of hardship, be it because of, like, medical debt or, like, some unexpected expense. And what we really want to do is basically streamline and automate the process of getting them hardship assistance program to basically help them avoid delinquency. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we predict delinquencies? How do we make sure that people stay out of, like, the traditional default and collection process? Because we believe that, like, that's just a very stressful and cumbersome and predatory process overall.
Yeah, we obviously it's near and dear to our hearts and love that, Guy. It's a very innovative concept, and give us a sense for what the origin story is behind that.
Yeah, so I mean, I know I always wanted to do something, and my co-founders as well. Like, all three of us are fairly entrepreneurial, so I think we all knew we wanted to do something. I don't know that we necessarily knew that we were going to build this particular business. The common thread, though, between the three co-founders is that we're all do-gooders in nature in some way, shape, or form. And so we wanted to do something that would have not just, like, impact, but, like, meaningful impact on society as a whole. Long story short, all three of us ended up meeting at McKinsey, where we were spending our time basically working with, like, the majority of the bigger banks, like, helping them on digital transformation. And long behold, one of the key pain points that we identified in the ecosystem was this, like, issue of delinquencies. And, as you already know, like, every year there's going to be, like, trillions of debt that gets originated, but also every year, millions of struggling families are going to, have hardships or have, like, problems and difficulties to repay back some of these debts. And so we wanted to find a better way. We looked around and tried to make a lot of recommendations, a lot of which were very difficult for some of these banks to implement, given their legacy systems and giving, like, the talent pools that they have. We also looked around at, like, a lot of the partners that are in the market. And one of the things that we realized is that those were fairly arcane as well and not very digital. And so as a result, we just saw a gap in the market and decided to quit our jobs and kind of, like, pursue this. And so that's sort of how Clerkie came about.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were kind of reading my mind there. It is an innovative concept. And quite frankly, I'm surprised it's taken this long in the industry to be able to provide a solution like this. What do you think specifically? You're starting to see a lot more momentum, certainly in the business. But I'd love to hear, what do you think from a technology perspective has fundamentally shifted such that, the solution, Clerkie, what you're offering is the right time, the right place, and the demand is able to finally be realized?
Yeah, I think there's a number of trends that's happening both in society at large, but also in the broader financial ecosystem as well. I think, like, as a society, we've gotten a lot more comfortable with digital channels. We've gotten a lot more comfortable with mobile solutions, and convenience is, like, something that is very much top of mind. For the average family, like, a lot of them are living paycheck to paycheck, and typically they don't have just the wherewithal or the time, frankly, or the mental energy to kind of, deal or assess some of these financial pressures that they're dealing with. And, oftentimes if they can find a financial solution that, helps them think through it, or better yet, that automates that process for them, that's always going to be, like, a win-win for them, right? On the financial institution side, I think one of the things that we've seen is, the internet and a lot of the digital platforms have been there for a while, but there's been some form of latency in terms of technology adoption on that front. Increasingly, I think they're realizing that a lot of their borrower base has gone digital and are not going to go back. And so there's been tremendous push internally to digitize a lot of these traditional processes that they have. So if you think of traditional bank back in the day, a lot of these processes would be done either manually or outsourced to third-party agencies that would basically call people and try to collect some of these funds back. But I think nowadays they're realizing that not only are some of these processes very predatory, they can't really have any control on some of the third parties, even though they might have very stringent rules put in place to mitigate some of these things. It is very, very hard to do so. And so increasingly, I think a lot of people have, looked around to try to figure out if there is a, better digital solution that can strengthen the bond and the relationship that they have with the consumer directly and basically help them, on that repayment journey, as we were talking about before. The last trend that I would say is, before, I think most FIs saw fintech companies as competitors, but I think increasingly the best executives realize that there's opportunities to create value overall for the ecosystem, and that they can partner with a lot of these firms and so forth, and that has been beneficial as well. But it always starts with the consumer. Whenever the consumer has a strong need and whenever the consumer has a strong pain point that they're trying to address, if you build a business around that, that's always going to be your recipes for success. And I think that's what's driving a lot of these adoption trends in the product market, for at least for our product.
Yeah, I mean, I so appreciate that. It is truly a win-win. Look, we're kind of at an interest rates are rising. What are you seeing in the market? How are you actually able to take the solution you've built and really address and allow financial institutions not just to adapt, but actually to capitalize on the market trends?
Yeah, it's I feel like the market is still doing a little bit of soul searching right now. I don't know that there is a strong pull in any one direction per se, but some of the things that we're seeing, at least right now, is some of the actions that the Fed has taken are actually working. I think inflation is starting to subside a little bit. That being said, we haven't seen meaningful slowdown until probably the end of the quarter in terms of consumer spending. So the consumer has continued to spend at a fairly healthy clip, I would say. And when you look at a lot of the consumer balance sheets as well, they haven't been too bad. We're certainly seeing delinquencies basically rise up, but they still have not reached pre-pandemic levels. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the extraordinary measures that the government actually took during the pandemic, where a lot of folks got a lot of subsidies and so forth. And a lot of folks also had a breather, to be frank, across a lot of different type of debts, right? Student loans have been paused, but also they use some of these paychecks that they got from the government to pay off some credit cards as well. And a lot of families got to benefit from lower interest rate when it comes to mortgages and so forth. So overall, I would say consumer balance sheets are fairly healthy, although they're starting to normalize back to traditional times, and we're seeing delinquencies go up. That being said, I think banks always want to be ahead of the tide and want to plan ahead of time to make sure that they're not caught flat-footed for some of these defaults or write-offs that might come down the line. And so I think a lot of people are being proactive in terms of adopting solutions that can help them mitigate some of these pitfalls later on. And I think a lot of them are also expecting at least delinquency rates to continue to increase over time. Our job is, again, very simple. Make sure that we're automating the process of helping struggling families repay back their debts and manage that responsibly in line with their budget. And to the extent that they are facing any hardships or difficulties, making sure that they know that there are automated solutions that are out there that can support them and help them bridge the gap and avoid default.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Again, I can underscore we've been fortunate to work with you and the team since the seed. Incredible to see kind of the continued momentum and just really beautiful positioning between what is the win-win, and the win-win being for both borrowers, right, as well as financial institutions. And that's it's a beautiful place to be. It's also very difficult to kind of find those unique business models that truly afford for that and that alignment. And so we're just so thrilled and honored to have been part of the journey so early on. Look, you've built a remarkable business. And in particular, I mean, the momentum has been off the charts. And I think a testament to that is you just raised $33 million for a Series A in this market environment. And I think that's really a testament to what you guys have done, the momentum, the growth, the demand, the being there at the right time, and really watching the need in this market. So talk a little bit about what's in the next chapter. Where's your areas of focus? What are your business priorities?
Yeah, I would say, there's a number of, like any early stage business, there's a number of standard, I guess, items that we need to tackle. And probably for me, like the thing that keeps me up at night the most is, scaling the team, so to say. People always talk about, metrics and like, KPIs and so forth. And those are always great. But at the end of the day, like you want to make sure that you're building a team that not only believes in the vision, but that like, preserves a hardworking culture, a culture of frugality, a culture of discipline that we've been able to, build over the years. And the last thing that we want is to, fall victim to some of the traditional kind of like, Silicon Valley mindset of like, spend money to make money, so to say. I think for us, we're always focused on building a fundamental business. And that's something that like, we're going to continue to focus on, but that's something that as we bring on more people, we want to make sure that that DNA is very much there. So I think like, that's probably like, the number one priority for me right now is kind of like, making sure that that culture is preserved in some ways. In terms of like, overall business priority, it's the usual suspect. I think for us, like, continuing to increase the network, continuing to, improve our models to, better detect delinquencies ahead of time and make sure that we can help support like, more and more families is always going to be something that like, not only adds value for, the consumer, but also adds value for the overall ecosystem. And so as we're making a lot of these hiring decisions, I think a lot of the talent has to go towards these two priorities. And so like, from an engineering and BD perspective, like, that's always going to be top of mind for us. And I'd be also remiss not to say thank you as well. You've always been like, a supporter. They always say like, find your tribe, and I'm very blessed to have find my tribe with Flourish and so forth. And so the 33 million, it's certainly kudos to the team. I think we've built like, a great business, but like, I think it's also kudos to the cap table because I think you guys have like, seen the vision and have supported very, very early on. So.
Oh, well, thank you. It's very kind of you. And, we know you do all the work, and we're just honored to be part of the journey and help in some small way. So thank you. All right, let's shift gears for just a little bit, because I think it's important, particularly for the broader audience. You are a founder. I think the founder journey, we've certainly loved getting to know you and been part of your journey, but I know it hasn't always been very easy. And if you're open to it, would love maybe to share a little bit about that experience, the journey, and maybe some learnings.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't expecting it to go that route. Most definitely, I think, as a Black founder, as you know, there's always going to be like, different types of challenges that, other types of founders might not face. So to say, I think generally speaking, as a underrepresented founder in general, there's going to be like, some of these challenges. You can be like, a woman, or you can be like, minority of any sort. I think like, what we've seen is, at least in the VC ecosystem, there's typically like, a cookie cutter approach or an archetype of founder that they typically look, and that's not necessarily going to look like us. I was very surprised, to be honest with you, because even as someone that is very well networked, that has gone to like, some of the best schools, like, having gone to Stanford and being in the Valley for so long, I wasn't prepared mentally, to be honest with you, or strategically, I wasn't prepared to see some of these kind of like, challenges or biases kind of like, creep into some of the fundraising process, but they do happen, right? And the best you can do is not lamb too much or, waste your time, overthinking it, but just accept it for what it is and just kind of like, move on, so to say. And so I would say like, to that end, yes, like, there's been some, ups and downs here and there, but I think the focus again is, making sure that you just focusing on the end goal, which is like, get the capital, but also making sure that you're getting the capital from people that have like-minded values that you want to be on the cap table and, just make sure that you get it done. Right. No complaints, no complaining. Just go out there and get it done, so to say. Um, but it is very much as biased as like, a lot of people would make it seem out there. I think even in my case, and I know you've seen like, circumstances like that. We've had cases where people have like, even questioned, whether or not the fact that I'm from Haiti is like, a risk to their capital, right? And as painful as it is to hear, that's just the reality of the ecosystem, right? And hopefully that will change. And I do see a lot of people making a lot of investments and setting up like a lot of opportunity funds to address some of these disparities and some of these gaps. But I think we still have a long ways to go. And until then, to any kind of like, woman or underrepresented minority that is out there, just, keep slugging away and, just keep the blinders on and focus on the main goal.
Lucky, I appreciate you talking about that. I think it's important as well that folks can hear that there's a support, that there's a group of entrepreneurs that have each other's back, that can share the experiences, that can find funders and folks where the bias does not exist, and that we as venture capitalists can also really embrace that and hopefully influence others. And I think that's a really important part. And so I appreciate you sharing, and I certainly hope that all of us can play a role in really shifting that, because I think it absolutely needs to shift. And I really appreciate your leadership. And maybe to that end, I mean, honestly, having worked with you and just, I've been so impressed, and we as a board have been impressed by the resilience, by the discipline, by the focus. I'm just, maybe some context, where does that come from? Where does that come from for Guy? And as importantly, how do you instill that in your team?
Yeah, I think for me, I stand on the shoulders of giants. There's been so many mentors and people that have guided me across my life. I think it starts with my mom, which has always had like, incredible work ethic. And yeah, she's always instilling us like, that resiliency and that kind of like, notion of don't feel sorry for yourself, just, keep pushing forward. The other person that's been like, a major influence for me has been like, Andy Grove. Um, he's been like, I guess the late great Andy Grove, I should say. Like he was a, a big mentor and a big influence for me. And yeah, I've watched even in his later years when he was like, stricken by his illness, like, he's not one to ever make excuses for himself. And he's like, very stern, very disciplined, very focused on everything that he does. And I think that's always been an inspiration for me. So I would probably say like, that resiliency probably stems from these two folks. Now that's not the only, I guess, qualities that's required from a leader. It certainly helps going back to some of the biases in the ecosystem that we were talking about before, but I think there's a number of other great qualities that I've picked up along the way. Be it EQ, be it being like, a good people leader, be it like, having empathy in some ways, but also having that harsh kind of like, honesty and thirst for feedback and so forth. So there's a number of good qualities, but that resiliency thread, I would say, would probably stem from these two folks.
No, I appreciate that. From a culture perspective, I do feel like you are a unique culture carrier, and you've been able to really pick folks on your team, obviously starting with the co-founding team, that really share those values and that vision. As you think about scaling, any thoughts around how do you maintain it? How do you maintain the culture and everything you've built thus far, and as you continue to hire high quality folks that align with this vision?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to take credit for it, but I think it really takes a village, right? I think all three co-founders has very strong strengths, and um, yeah, in some cases they do overlap, and in other cases they don't. But that being said, I do think we've been very thoughtful and have done a pretty good job of embedding some of these strengths and some of these values and cultures within the company itself. And quite frankly, I don't sit around trying to police how work gets done or how everything gets done. But some of the things that we do that's very critical is when people get onboarded, we very much sit down with everyone and make sure that they understand, hey, this is the way we're going to work, and this is the culture of the company, and this is the values that we espouse, and make sure that that trickles down. And from there on, it's every single employee's responsibility to kind of make sure that they're upholding those values, not just for themselves, but holding their peers accountable for these values as well. And so I think it really takes a village, and I think that accountability is really reinforced at the employee level, for every employee, including myself, right? Just because I'm a CEO founder doesn't mean that somebody else can hold me accountable. And I think it has been a great recipe for success. Naturally, as you get a lot bigger, I'm sure there's going to be some challenges that comes along the way, and I'm sure that's going to be a lot more difficult to maintain in some ways. But so far so good. So we'll continue riding the wave and continue counting our blessings.
All right. Well, I would be remiss in not asking for your sage advice. There are probably a number of aspiring entrepreneurs, or maybe entrepreneurs early in their journey as well, underrepresented ones, and would very much just appreciate any insight, guidance, tricks that you might have as they navigate, especially during this market, this time as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't know if I'm the the wisest entrepreneur. It's still kind of early innings for us, and there's still so much to be done. And I'm still very much learning too in some ways. But some of the things that I've picked up so far is priority number one is focus on the business and focus that you're building a fundamentally sound business. Don't ever go away from that. There's gonna be believers and non-believers, but at the end of the day, make sure that you're focusing on the things that matters for the business. And to name a few: profitability, business model, culture. All of these things are things that make a sound, solid, and robust business. And these are the things that should matter. Don't worry too much about the hype. Don't worry too much about getting incredible growth at any cost. You should focus on growth, but growth shouldn't necessarily be the top priority in terms in front of the fundamentals of the business, so to say. And then lastly, as you're doing that, focus on your customers and focus on the problems that they have. Make sure that you're constantly talking to your customers, right? Because they're going to guide you and they're going to help you shape your product to make sure that it is the best available product that is on the market to the extent possible. And as you're doing that, always try to think of ways to make it very sticky. Because without any stickiness, you can build a great business today and not have it tomorrow, right? And so I would probably say, if these are some of the patterns I've recognized and some of the patterns that we try to live by. And so to the extent that those can be helpful to others, most definitely adopt those. And for the underrepresented minorities and founders out there, just keep your head high, keep fighting, keep slugging, and keep building a good business.
Well, I really appreciate, Guy, your insights, and obviously, you're just an important contributor in the fintech ecosystem, in the broader ecosystem, and I appreciate you sharing your experiences and certainly the journey thus far. And yes, it's early, but it's been quite a ride so far, and the impact has been far-reaching, even at the the stage of the business. So super honored to be part of that. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us, Em.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys all for joining us today. If you guys have any questions about Flourish Ventures or our portfolio companies like Clerkie and others, please don't hesitate to drop us an email. We're events@flourishventures.com. Thanks again, and until next time.